what exists beyond the boundaries of your physical form. What happens when consciousness separates from flesh and bone, drifting into dimensions that human eyes were never designed to perceive? Tonight, I'm presenting 3 absolutely genuine accounts from individuals who practiced astral projection and encountered something that shattered their understanding of reality. These aren't fantasy tales or fictional scenarios. These are documented experiences from real people who left their bodies and discovered that the astral plane is far from empty. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now on your clock. I want to know how many of you are listening to this in the dark. Some of them were experienced practitioners who had projected hundreds of times without incident. Others were complete beginners who stumbled into territories they were utterly unprepared for. The accounts you're about to hear contain encounters with entities that defy explanation, experiences that left permanent psychological scars, discoveries about the nature of consciousness that these individuals wish they had never made. Before we venture into these disturbing testimonies, I need you to do something for me. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button right now. Tap the like icon and activate that notification bell so you receive alerts whenever new content drops on this channel. Your engagement directly supports the survivors who trust the Nightmare Index with their most terrifying experiences. Now, prepare yourself. Find a comfortable position, and whatever you do, stay grounded in your physical body while you listen to these accounts. Let's begin. The entity standing in the corner of my bedroom had been watching me sleep for 11 years, and I never knew it existed until I left my body for the first time. My name is Declan, and what I'm about to describe occurred in February of 2019 at my apartment in Tucson, Arizona. I'm sharing this experience because I believe people deserve to understand what they're potentially inviting into their awareness when they experiment with consciousness expansion techniques. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. I had been curious about astral projection since my college years. I consumed every book, every YouTube tutorial, every Reddit thread dedicated to the practice. The concept fascinated me intellectually. The idea that human consciousness could separate from the physical vessel and explore non-physical realms seemed like the ultimate adventure, the ultimate proof that we are more than meat and electrical impulses. For nearly a decade, I attempted various techniques without success: wake back to bed methods, visualization exercises, binaural beat recordings, meditation practices. Nothing worked. I would feel occasional vibrations, sometimes a sense of heaviness or floating, but I could never achieve full separation. I began to wonder if I was simply incapable of the experience. Then, in January of 2019, everything changed. I had been dealing with tremendous stress at my job. I worked as a software engineer for a healthcare company, and a major project deadline had pushed me to my physical and mental limits. I was averaging 4 hours of sleep per night. My eating habits had deteriorated. My exercise routine had completely collapsed. On January 28th, I came home from a particularly brutal 14-hour workday. I collapsed onto my bed without changing clothes, without eating dinner, without even removing my shoes. I was unconscious within seconds. What happened next felt different from any dream I had ever experienced. I became aware that I was floating. Not metaphorically floating, physically rising. I could feel myself ascending from the mattress, my back lifting first, then my shoulders, then my head. There was no sensation of weight, no pull of gravity, just a gentle upward drift, like a helium balloon released from a child's hand. I opened my eyes, except I knew my physical eyes remained closed. These were different eyes. astral eyes, perception without organs. I was hovering approximately 3 feet above my bed, looking down at my own sleeping body. The experience was profoundly disorienting. I could see myself sprawled across the mattress, still wearing my work clothes, my chest rising and falling with each unconscious inhalation. My face looked peaceful, relaxed, completely unaware of what was happening above it. For several moments, I simply observed. I marveled at the bizarre sensation of existing in 2 locations simultaneously. I could feel a connection to my physical form, not visible exactly, but present, like an invisible thread tethering me to the body below. I understood instinctively that this thread was important, that I should not let it stretch too far. Then I became aware of something else in the room. It was standing in the corner. The corner directly opposite my bed. The corner that had always been empty. The corner I had walked past thousands of times without a second thought. At first, I thought my astral vision was malfunctioning somehow. The shape in the corner didn't make sense. It was tall, impossibly tall. Its form stretched from floor to ceiling, compressed and folded in ways that defied spatial logic. It was dark, not black exactly. Dark in a way that suggested an absence of light rather than a presence of color, like a hole cut into the fabric of reality. And it was watching me. I couldn't see eyes. The entity didn't possess facial features in any recognizable sense. But I could feel its attention, its awareness, its focus locked onto my floating astral form with an intensity that made me want to scream. The entity didn't approach. It didn't speak. It simply stood there, compressed into that corner, radiating a presence that I can only describe as ancient. This thing had existed for eons. It had watched countless beings. It had waited in countless corners. And now it was watching me. I panicked. I didn't know what I was doing, but instinct took over. I willed myself back toward my body. I crashed into my physical form with a jolt that made my entire frame convulse. My eyes snapped open. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Sweat soaked through my already worn work clothes. I sat up immediately and stared at the corner. Empty. Just shadows and drywall. Just the same corner that had always been there. I convinced myself it was a dream, an unusually vivid nightmare triggered by exhaustion and stress. I took a hot shower, ate some leftover pasta, and went to bed properly this time. I slept fitfully, but I slept. The next morning, I almost forgot about the experience entirely. Work consumed my attention. The project demanded every ounce of mental energy I possessed. I didn't have time to contemplate strange dreams about floating above my body. But something had shifted. Something fundamental. I began noticing things I had never noticed before. The corner where the entity had stood always felt cold. Not dramatically cold, just a few degrees cooler than the rest of the apartment. I tested this with a digital thermometer. The corner consistently registered between 2 and 4 degrees, lower than surrounding areas. This was unusual for a corner that received no direct airflow from the HVAC system. I also noticed that my cat avoided that corner. I had a gray tabby named Pixel, who typically roamed every inch of the apartment. She slept on counters, in closets, under furniture. She explored constantly. But she never went near that corner. If I placed her there deliberately, she would immediately walk away. If I tossed a toy into that area, she would refuse to retrieve it. These observations unsettled me, but I rationalized them away. Temperature variations in apartments were common. Cats were peculiar creatures with unexplainable preferences. There was nothing supernatural about any of this. 2 weeks later, I projected again. This time was intentional. The curiosity had become unbearable. I needed to know if what I had experienced was real or imagined. I needed to see that corner again from the astral perspective. I used the wake back to bed method. I set an alarm for 4 a.m., forced myself awake for 30 minutes, then lay back down with the intention of remaining conscious as my body fell asleep. The technique worked far more easily than it ever had before. Within minutes, I felt the familiar vibrations, the sense of separation, the gentle lift. I rose above my body. I floated near the ceiling. I turned toward the corner. It was still there. The entity hadn't moved. Not 1 inch. It remained compressed into that corner, its impossible form stretching and folding, its attention fixed on the bed below, fixed on my sleeping body, fixed on the vessel I had just vacated. This time, I forced myself to observe more carefully. I pushed down the terror and studied the thing in the corner. It was humanoid in the loosest possible sense. I could distinguish what might have been limbs. Long appendages that bent at angles no human joint could achieve. I could perceive what might have been a head, an elongated protrusion at the top of the form, tilted slightly, as if curious about what it was watching. But the proportions were wrong. Everything was stretched and distorted, like a reflection in a funhouse mirror, like a human template had been fed through some cosmic algorithm that corrupted the output. The entity became aware that I was observing it. I felt its attention shift from my sleeping body to my floating form. There was recognition in that shift, acknowledgement. This thing knew I could see it now. It knew the rules had changed. And then it spoke, not with words, not with sound. The entity communicated in concepts, direct transmissions of meaning that bypassed language entirely. What it conveyed was simple. Chilling. Absolute. Finally. Just that one concept. Finally. As if it had been waiting. As if my ability to perceive it was something it had anticipated for a very long time. I slammed back into my body. I didn't gradually return. I crashed. The impact was violent enough to leave me nauseous. I spent the next hour in my bathroom, retching over the toilet, my mind racing through implications I didn't want to consider. The entity had been watching me sleep for years. It had stood in that corner every single night, observing my unconscious form, waiting for something. Waiting for this. Waiting for me to develop the perception necessary to acknowledge its presence. What did it want? What was it waiting for? What happens now that I could see it? I didn't project again for 3 weeks. I was too afraid. But I couldn't escape the awareness. I knew it was there. Every night, as I lay in bed trying to fall asleep, I could feel its presence in that corner. I could sense its patient observation, its eternal waiting. My sleep quality deteriorated dramatically. I began experiencing vivid nightmares that felt different from ordinary dreams. In these nightmares, I would wake up in my bed, get out, walk around my apartment, and everything would seem completely normal. Then I would notice the corner, and the entity would be visible, and it would start approaching. I would wake up for real, gasping, sweating, heart racing, and I would stare at that corner, knowing that just because I couldn't see it didn't mean it wasn't there. In early February, I decided to document everything. I set up cameras throughout my apartment. I recorded every night's sleep. I reviewed the footage each morning, looking for anything unusual. The cameras captured nothing supernatural, just me, sleeping restlessly, tossing and turning through nights that felt endless. Just Pixel, avoiding the corner as always. Just shadows that never moved in ways they shouldn't. But on February 12th, one camera captured something that made my blood run cold. At 3:17 a.m., the temperature in my bedroom dropped 4 degrees in less than 30 seconds. The camera's thermal overlay showed the change clearly. The cold originated from the corner. It radiated outward in waves, washing over my sleeping body, then receding back to its source. At the exact moment the temperature dropped, I rolled over in my sleep. My face turned toward the corner. My lips moved. The audio was faint, but audible. "I see you." I had spoken those words in my sleep. I had spoken directly to the corner, and I had no memory of any dream that night. I moved out of that apartment on February 15th. I broke my lease early. I paid the penalty. I left furniture behind. I didn't care about any of it. I just needed to escape that corner, that presence, that thing that had been watching me for over a decade. My new apartment is smaller, more expensive, but every corner is just a corner. The temperature is consistent throughout. My cat roams freely without avoiding any particular area. I haven't attempted astral projection since leaving. I'm afraid to. I'm afraid that the entity wasn't attached to the location. I'm afraid that it was attached to me. That wherever I go, it follows. That every time I close my eyes and drift toward sleep, it's there, watching, waiting. Something followed me back from the astral plane, and it has been living inside my home ever since. I go by Rashida, and the events I'm describing occurred between March and August of 2023 in my townhouse outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm a practicing nurse who works night shifts at a regional hospital. I'm grounded, practical, scientific in my approach to most phenomena. What I experienced defies every rational framework I possess, and I'm still struggling to integrate it into my understanding of reality. I discovered astral projection through a meditation app. It wasn't something I sought out deliberately. The app had a section dedicated to consciousness exploration, and one evening after a particularly exhausting shift, I clicked on a guided meditation labeled Out-of-Body Basics. I expected relaxation. Maybe some interesting visualization. What I got was something far more significant. The guided meditation worked immediately. On my very first attempt, I separated from my physical form. I floated upward. I looked down at my body resting on my living room couch. I saw the television playing a nature documentary I had put on for background noise. I saw my cat, Jasper, curled up near my feet. I saw everything with perfect clarity. The experience lasted perhaps 30 seconds before I snapped back. But those 30 seconds changed everything. I had touched something real, something beyond the material world, something that proved consciousness existed independently of the brain. Over the following weeks, I practiced obsessively. Every night after work, I would come home, shower, and spend an hour attempting projection. My success rate climbed steadily. Soon, I could separate almost at will. I began exploring my immediate environment, my townhouse, my neighborhood, the surrounding streets. The astral realm was beautiful. Colors seemed more vibrant. Details appeared sharper. There was a quality of luminescence to everything, as if reality itself was gently glowing. I felt free in a way I had never experienced while bound to my physical form. I felt limitless. I should have been more careful. I should have researched the risks. I should have listened to the warnings that appeared in every serious discussion of astral projection. But I was intoxicated by the experience. I was addicted to the sensation of floating through walls, of soaring above rooftops, of existing as pure consciousness untethered from flesh. On March 23, 2023, I went too far. I had been projecting for approximately 2 hours that evening. I had traveled beyond my immediate neighborhood for the first time. I had drifted over downtown Philadelphia, marveling at the city lights from an aerial perspective no aircraft could provide. I had descended through the roofs of buildings, observing the lives unfolding within. Families eating dinner, couples watching television, An old man sitting alone in a dim kitchen, staring at nothing. The further I traveled, the more I noticed something unusual. The astral realm wasn't empty. There were other presences, other entities. Most of them seemed unaware of me or uninterested. They drifted past like fish in a current, absorbed in their own incomprehensible purposes. But one of them noticed me. It was different from the others. More solid somehow. More defined. While the other entities seemed wispy and transparent, this one possessed density. Weight. It had a form that was vaguely humanoid, but fundamentally wrong. Too many joints in its limbs. A head that sat at an impossible angle. Fingers that were too long and too numerous. It saw me. I felt its attention lock onto my astral form like a spotlight. And then it began approaching. I should have returned to my body immediately. Every instinct screamed at me to flee. But I was paralyzed by something I didn't understand. Not fear, exactly. Fascination. The entity radiated something that drew me toward it, even as my rational mind demanded I escape. The thing drifted closer. It reached out with one of those too long hands. Its fingers stretched toward the silver cord that connected my astral form to my physical body. The cord that every projection guide described as sacred, inviolable, the lifeline that must never be touched. I screamed without sound. I willed myself backward. I retreated toward my body with every ounce of intention I could muster. But the entity was faster. Its fingers brushed my silver cord. Just a touch, the briefest contact. Like a strand of spider silk brushing against your skin. The sensation was indescribable. It felt like electricity, like ice, like a violation so fundamental that I still shudder remembering it. Something passed from the entity into that cord. Something that traveled down the connection toward my physical body. I slammed back into my form. I sat up on my couch, gasping, my hands clutching my chest, my heart racing at a dangerous pace. Jasper leaped away from me, startled by my sudden animation. The television continued playing its nature documentary as if nothing had happened. For several minutes, I just sat there, trying to calm myself, trying to convince myself that what I had experienced was just a particularly vivid projection, that nothing had actually followed me, that my silver cord remained intact and uncontaminated. Then I noticed the cold. It started in my chest, a localized coldness, like I had swallowed ice water. But the cold didn't fade. It intensified. It spread. Within minutes, my entire torso felt frozen from the inside. I checked my temperature. Normal. I took my pulse. Elevated from adrenaline, but otherwise unremarkable. By every measurable standard, I was fine, but I felt the cold. I felt it living inside me like a parasite. Over the following days, the cold became my constant companion. It was always there, sometimes concentrated in my chest, sometimes spreading to my limbs, sometimes retreating to a small, hard knot somewhere behind my sternum, but always present, always reminding me that something was wrong. My personality began changing in ways I couldn't control. I became irritable, impatient. I snapped at colleagues who had never bothered me before. I found myself thinking cruel thoughts about patients who were suffering. I fantasized about violent confrontations that I would never have imagined prior to that night. These thoughts weren't mine. They felt imposed, projected, like a radio station bleeding through into my normal mental broadcasts. I would be eating breakfast, thinking about my day, and suddenly I would be imagining what it would feel like to hurt someone. The images were vivid, detailed, disturbing. By early April, the cold began manifesting externally. Objects I touched would become chilled. My phone screen would frost over when I held it too long. Water left in glasses beside my bed would develop ice crystals by morning. My cat refused to come near me. Jasper, who had slept beside me every night for 4 years, now stayed on the opposite end of the townhouse. He would watch me from doorways, his eyes wide, his fur raised. He saw something I couldn't see. He perceived a presence that my ordinary senses couldn't detect. I returned to astral projection research, this time focusing on the dangers, on what could go wrong, on entities that attached themselves to practitioners. The information I found was terrifying. Attachments, that was the term. Entities that latched onto the silver cord. That used the connection as a gateway into the physical realm. That could influence thoughts and emotions. That fed on specific energies that were almost impossible to remove once established. I had brought something back with me, something that had touched my cord and followed the connection home. Something that was now sharing my body, my consciousness, my life. In mid-April, I sought help from a woman who claimed expertise in spiritual matters. She called herself a psychic surgeon. She operated out of a small office in West Philadelphia, decorated with crystals and tapestries and burning incense. I was skeptical, but desperate. She took one look at me and went pale. "Something is attached," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Something old. Something hungry. I can see it wrapped around your energy field like a second skin." She attempted to remove it. For 2 hours, she performed rituals. She burned sage. She recited prayers in languages I didn't recognize. She visualized light and protection and all the tools of her practice. Nothing worked. "It's too deeply embedded," she finally admitted. "You let it touch your cord. You gave it access to your very essence. I can't remove something that's bonded at that level." I left her office in despair. I drove home in a fugue state, barely aware of traffic or surroundings. I sat in my townhouse as darkness fell, feeling the cold pulse inside me, feeling the foreign thoughts push against my own. That night, I saw it for the first time with my physical eyes. I was lying in bed, trying to sleep, when a shadow separated from the corner of my room. It didn't walk, it flowed, like liquid darkness pouring across the floor. It approached my bed with terrible patience, taking its time, savoring my fear. I couldn't speak, I couldn't scream. I was paralyzed by something beyond normal sleep paralysis. The entity had frozen me in place. It wanted me to witness what came next. The shadow climbed onto my bed. It flowed over my legs, my torso, my chest. It settled its weight on top of me, pressing down with a cold so intense I thought my skin would crystallize. And then it spoke, not with sound, with meaning transmitted directly into my mind. "We are one now. Stop struggling. Accept the bond." I found my voice. I screamed. The paralysis broke. The shadow dispersed. I lay gasping in my bed, the covers soaked with sweat that was somehow also freezing cold. From that night forward, the entity no longer hid. It appeared regularly, in reflections, in peripheral vision, in the dark spaces of my townhouse that I couldn't bring myself to illuminate. It was always watching, always reminding me of its presence, always reinforcing the bond. I tried everything. I tried religious intervention. I tried more psychic healers. I tried medication for what I suspected might be hallucinations. Nothing helped. The cold remained. The thoughts remained. The shadow remained. By July of 2023, I was barely functional. I had taken medical leave from my nursing job. I couldn't trust myself around patients anymore. The violent thoughts had become constant. The impulses had become powerful. I was afraid of what I might do if I lost control. I made a decision. If astral projection had caused this problem, perhaps astral projection could solve it. I projected again for the first time in months. I left my body and rose into the astral realm, expecting to confront the entity on its home territory. What I found was worse than I imagined. The thing attached to my silver cord had grown. It was no longer the vague humanoid form that had touched me in Philadelphia. It was massive now, a bloated dark mass that pulsed and writhed around my connection to my physical body. It had been feeding on me for months, drawing energy from my life force, growing stronger with each passing day. And my silver cord had changed. What should have been luminescent silver was now tarnished, corrupted. Threads of darkness wound through its structure like veins of infection. The entity noticed my observation. It spoke again. That direct transmission of meaning that bypassed all language. You cannot remove me. We are integrated. If you sever the bond, you sever yourself. I understood its implication. The entity had merged with my cord so completely that separating us would damage my fundamental connection to my physical body. Removing it might kill me. Or worse, leave me trapped in the astral realm permanently, disconnected from the vessel that allowed me to experience physical existence. I returned to my body in defeat. I lay in the darkness of my townhouse, feeling the cold that never left, listening to the thoughts that weren't mine, watching the shadows gather in corners. I still live in that townhouse. I still feel the cold. I still experience the foreign thoughts that push against my consciousness. The entity remains attached, feeding, growing, waiting for something I don't want to contemplate. I've learned to coexist with it to some degree. I've developed techniques for identifying which thoughts are mine and which are imposed. I've found ways to keep the violent impulses at bay. I've accepted that this is my reality now. But some nights, when the cold intensifies and the shadows gather and the presence makes itself fully known, I wonder how long this balance can last. I wonder what happens when the entity finishes growing, when it no longer needs to hide, when it becomes strong enough to take complete control. I wonder if I'll still be myself when that moment arrives, or if what wears my body will be something entirely different. There is a place in the astral realm where projectors gather. I found it by accident. What I witnessed there convinced me that some humans are far more dangerous than any supernatural entity. My name is Tobias, and the events I'm recounting happened during the summer of 2023 in the astral plane, accessible from my apartment in Seattle, Washington. I was 34 years old at the time. I had been practicing projection for approximately 2 years with consistent success. I considered myself experienced, capable, protected. I was none of those things. The astral realm has geography, not physical geography in the way we understand it, but consistent locations that projectors can learn to navigate. With practice, you can return to the same spots repeatedly. You can map territories. You can explore regions that possess distinct characteristics and atmospheres. During my explorations, I had encountered various entities. Shadow beings that observed without interacting, luminous forms that radiated benevolence, amorphous presences that defied any categorization. Most were neutral, some were friendly, a few were hostile and required avoidance. But I had never encountered other projectors, other living humans who had separated from their physical forms and were exploring the same dimensions. That changed on June 17th, 2023. I was drifting through a region I had never visited before. The area felt different from my usual exploration zones, heavier, denser. The normal luminescence of the astral realm was dimmed here, replaced by muted shadows and indistinct shapes. In the distance, I noticed a gathering. Multiple forms clustered together, their outlines more solid than typical astral entities. They appeared organized, deliberate, waiting. Curiosity overcame caution. I drifted closer. There were approximately 12 of them, human projectors. I could tell by the silver cords extending from their forms, stretching back toward wherever their physical bodies rested. The cords varied in brightness. Some were luminescent and strong, others were dimmer, suggesting projectors of lesser experience or energy. They were arranged in a rough circle. At the center of the circle stood something that made me halt my approach. An entity, but not like any entity I had previously encountered. This thing was massive. It towered over the human projectors, its form composed of geometric shapes that constantly shifted and rearranged. Cubes became pyramids, became spheres, became structures that had no earthly name. It radiated awareness, intelligence, power, and it radiated hunger. One of the projectors noticed my observation, a male form, his astral body more solid and defined than the others, suggesting considerable experience. He drifted toward me, leaving the circle. New here? His communication was direct transmission, meaning without sound, but I could detect personality in the delivery. Amusement, superiority, contempt. "What is this?" I asked, indicating the gathering. "This is the meeting place, where serious practitioners come to advance beyond the limitations of individual practice." "What is that thing in the center?" The male projector's amusement intensified. "That is the facilitator. It helps us achieve states of consciousness that would take decades to develop naturally. It accelerates our growth, expands our capabilities. All it requires is a small offering in return." Something about his phrasing made me deeply uncomfortable. "What kind of offering?" "Energy, life force, nothing we can't spare." He paused, studying my form. "Your cord is strong, bright. You have significant vitality to offer. The facilitator would appreciate your contribution." I began backing away. I didn't come here to offer anything. I was just exploring. No one comes here by accident. The projector's tone shifted. The amusement disappeared, replaced by something cold, predatory. "The facilitator draws those with potential. It senses vitality across dimensional barriers. It called you here for a purpose." I noticed that other projectors were leaving the circle. They were drifting toward me, surrounding me, cutting off potential escape routes. "I'm leaving now," I stated firmly. "I don't want any part of this." Leaving isn't that simple. The male projector was directly in front of me now. Once you've witnessed the meeting place, you become part of the community. The facilitator doesn't release those it calls. I turned to flee. I willed myself back toward my body, toward the silver cord that stretched behind me into the astral distance. They were on me before I could escape. Multiple projectors grabbed my astral form. Their grips were solid, inescapable. I had never been touched in the astral realm before. I didn't know it was possible to be restrained like this. They dragged me toward the circle, toward the facilitator. The massive entity shifted its geometric forms, orienting something that might have been a tension in my direction. Fresh vitality. The male projector's voice dripped with satisfaction. "The facilitator rewards those who bring new offerings. My standing improves significantly tonight." I struggled. I fought. I tried every technique I knew for returning to my body. Nothing worked. Their combined intention held me in place. The facilitator began extending tendrils, dark, geometric shapes that separated from its main mass and reached toward me like probing fingers. Each tendril pulsed with hunger, anticipation. The entity was preparing to feed. In desperation, I focused on my silver cord, the connection to my physical body, the lifeline that every projection guide described as unbreakable. I poured every ounce of will into that cord. I demanded that it pull me back. I made my physical form a priority that superseded all astral bonds. The cord responded. It contracted violently. The projectors holding me were yanked forward as my form accelerated backward toward my body. Their grips broke. I was torn from their grasp, with a sensation like ripping fabric. The last thing I perceived before slamming back into my physical form was the facilitator's response. Not anger, amusement, patience, as if my escape was a temporary inconvenience, as if it knew I would eventually return. I woke gasping in my Seattle apartment. Dawn light was streaming through my windows. I had been projecting for over 6 hours without realizing the passage of time. My physical body was cold, stiff. My muscles ached, as if I had been running for miles. For several days, I refused to project. The experience had shaken me profoundly. The realization that other humans could be as dangerous as supernatural entities, that organized groups existed in the astral realm, feeding human vitality to ancient beings in exchange for power. But curiosity is a relentless force, and despite my fear, I needed to understand more. On June 24th, I projected again. I deliberately avoided the region where I had encountered the meeting place. I explored familiar territories, safe zones, areas where I had never experienced any threats. The male projector found me anyway. He appeared without warning, drifting into my perception with casual confidence. He was alone this time. No circle of followers, no facilitator waiting to feed. "You escaped," he observed. "That's rare. Most new offerings don't have the will to break free." "Leave me alone." I began retreating, preparing to snap back to my body at the first sign of aggression. "Calm yourself. I'm not here to capture you. I'm here to recruit you. I'm not interested in feeding my life force to that thing." The projector laughed, not with sound, but with transmitted amusement that felt condescending. "You misunderstand our arrangement. The facilitator doesn't consume those who join willingly. It only feeds on those who resist. Those who serve receive power in exchange." "What kind of power?" "The ability to manipulate the physical world from the astral state. The capacity to influence the minds of sleeping humans. Extended projection duration without physical fatigue. Capabilities that take lifetimes to develop naturally." I should have ended the conversation. I should have returned to my body and never projected again. But I wanted to understand. I wanted to know how deep this rabbit hole went. "How many of you are there?" I asked. "In Seattle, perhaps 30 regular practitioners. Worldwide, thousands. We've been operating for centuries. The facilitator is ancient. It has been cultivating human servants since before your history was recorded." "Why are you telling me this?" The projector drifted closer. His form was incredibly solid, detailed. He had been practicing for a very long time. "Because you have potential, strong cord, significant vitality, natural talent for projection. The facilitator noticed you before I did. It wants you specifically, not as food, as a servant. And if I refuse, then we continue as before. You project, we observe. Eventually we catch you in a moment of weakness. The facilitator feeds. Your physical body dies in its sleep. Authorities record it as sudden, unexplained cardiac arrest. Another tragedy without explanation. The casual way he described murdering me was terrifying. This wasn't a threat delivered with emotion. It was a statement of fact, a prediction of inevitable outcome. "You can't reach me in the physical world," I said, hoping it was true. "Can't we?" The projector's amusement returned. "Check your apartment when you wake up. Look for signs of our presence. We've been visiting your sleeping body for weeks now, studying you, preparing you. I snapped back to my body immediately. I searched my apartment with frantic energy. I looked for anything unusual, any sign of intrusion, any evidence that I hadn't been alone while sleeping. I found it in my bedroom closet. A symbol, drawn on the interior wall in something dark. Geometric shapes arranged in patterns that made my eyes ache to observe. The same geometric configurations I had seen composing the facilitator's form. Someone had entered my apartment while I slept. Someone had marked my space with a symbol connected to that ancient entity. The boundary between astral and physical had been breached. I moved out of that apartment the following week. I found a new place. I installed security cameras, motion sensors, everything I could think of to detect intrusion. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. I didn't project. I slept lightly, waking at every sound. I began to hope that my relocation had broken whatever connection the group had established. Then the dreams started. Every night, without exception, I found myself in the meeting place. Not through deliberate projection, through forced dreams. The facilitator had found a way to reach me regardless of my conscious intentions. In these dreams, I would stand before the entity. Its geometric forms would shift and pulse. Its tendrils would reach toward me, stopping just short of contact, and its voice would penetrate my mind. You cannot escape. You were called. You will serve. Resistance only delays the inevitable. I would wake exhausted, drained, as if the facilitator was feeding on me through the dreams themselves, gradually, patiently, wearing down my defenses one night at a time. By August of 2023, I had lost significant weight. My energy levels had plummeted. My work performance suffered. I looked like someone with a chronic illness, though every medical test returned normal results. The male projector visited my dreams regularly. He repeated his offer. Serve willingly and receive power. Resist and be slowly consumed. In mid-August, I made a choice born of desperation. I stopped sleeping. I used every stimulant available. Caffeine, energy supplements, prescription medications obtained through questionable means. I forced myself to remain awake for days at a time, collapsing only when my body physically could not continue. The shortened sleep periods reduced the dreams. The facilitator still reached me, but its contact was brief, insufficient for significant feeding. I was starving it of the access it required. This is my current existence. I sleep as little as humanly possible. I never project deliberately. I surround myself with people during rest periods, hoping that observers will detect if my body shows signs of attack. The male projector occasionally appears in the brief dreams I cannot avoid. His tone has shifted from recruitment to anger. You're destroying yourself. The facilitator offers partnership. You choose slow suicide instead. Perhaps he's right. Perhaps my resistance is ultimately futile. Perhaps I'm simply prolonging my suffering while the inevitable end approaches. But I refuse to serve that thing. I refuse to join a community of humans who feed their own kind to an ancient entity in exchange for power. I refuse to become a predator hunting other projectors in the astral realm. If I die fighting. If my body fails from sleep deprivation, at least the facilitator won't consume my vitality. At least I won't become another servant in its eternal cultivation of human energy. The astral realm is real. Projection is genuine. The experiences available to those who separate from their bodies are extraordinary. But there are predators in those dimensions, not just entities. Humans, organized, ruthless. Ancient networks that have been operating since before civilization emerged. If you practice projection, be careful. Stay in familiar territories. Never approach gatherings of other projectors. And if something calls to you from the darkness of the astral realm, demanding your presence, promising power. Run. Return to your body. Wake up, and never go back to that place again. Those were 3 genuine accounts from individuals who ventured beyond the boundaries of physical existence and discovered that the astral realm is far from safe. 3 stories of entities watching, entities attaching, entities hunting. Now, before we wrap up tonight's session, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now, telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I'm genuinely curious. Are you listening to this at 2 a.m. alone in your bedroom? Are you driving through empty highways at midnight with this playing through your speakers? Are you lying in bed right now, trying to fall asleep, wondering if something is watching you from the corner of your room? Tell me your city. Tell me your country. Tell me the hour on your clock. I read every single comment. And I want to know exactly how many of you are experiencing these nightmares in the darkness right now. Also, let me know which story disturbed you the most tonight. Was it the entity that watched Declan sleep for 11 years without his knowledge? Was it the attachment that followed Rashida back through her silver cord? Or was it the organized network of human predators serving an ancient being in the astral realm? Drop that number in the comments. 1, 2, or 3. And if you've ever experienced astral projection yourself, I want to hear about it. What did you encounter out there? Did something see you? Did something follow you back? Your story could be featured in a future video. Every person who practices projection takes a risk. The dimensions beyond our physical reality contain wonders that defy description. But they also contain dangers that most practitioners never anticipate. Ancient beings, predatory humans, organized networks that have been operating for centuries. If you experiment with consciousness expansion, please proceed with extreme caution. Research thoroughly. Protect yourself energetically. Never approach unknown entities or gatherings. And always maintain a strong connection to your physical body. The silver cord is your lifeline. Guard it carefully. Thank you for spending this time exploring the darkness alongside me. If these accounts affected you, if they made you reconsider experimenting with projection, then they served their purpose. Knowledge of danger is the first step toward protection. Now do me a favor before you click away. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button right now. We're building a community of people who appreciate true horror, and I want you to be part of it. Tap the like icon if these stories kept you engaged, and absolutely make sure you ring that notification bell so you never miss another upload from the Nightmare Index. Every subscription, every like, every comment about where you're watching from. It all tells the algorithm to push this content to more people who appreciate genuine terror. Your support keeps this channel alive and allows survivors to share their experiences with an audience that believes them. So drop that comment. Where are you? What time is it? Which story got under your skin? I'll be reading every response in the darkness of my own room, waiting to hear from you. Stay grounded. Stay present. Stay inside your body until we meet again in the darkness. See you in our next story.